Looking at this, and I think sometimes women become their own worst enemies.
I do too.
They don't really do the kinds of supportive things that they could do for other women, and they isolate themselves. And I've seen that occur in a lot of instances.
Hello and welcome to Women's Career Day, part of the Worth Quoting series sponsored by Open Campus Television at Florida Community College at Jacksonville. Today we're going to discuss At Home in the Executive Suite, part of our program Making It to the Top. I'm Kelly Williams, your host. Our guests are Virginia Borrock, Executive Director of Gateway Community Services, Inc. Virginia helped develop a system of care and rehabilitation for cocaine-addicted pregnant women and their newborns. And also with us today is Julie Woodruff. Julie is Vice President of the Foundation for Healthcare at Baptist Medical Center, and she developed and administered the $16 million campaign for the new Children's Hospital at Baptist. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's talk about now. At Home in the Executive Suite, that really allows us to talk about a lot of things, some intimate things, really about what it's like really to be there in your positions and how your family plays a role, what risks you've had to take, some of your fears, some of the difficult times, some of the good times, and, you know, the contributors to all of that. So let's talk first of all about just being there and sometimes the risks involved in just being there. You were telling an interesting story earlier, Julie, about just the whole risk in taking your job.
Well, I changed careers. I changed fields that I had been in. I was trained as a teacher and I taught for a long time, as lots of women did. When I came along in my generation, we were nurses or teachers. And,
or home economists.
Or home economists, that's right. So I changed from the education field to healthcare, and I was scared to death. I was intrigued and excited and could not wait to make the change because I loved what I had seen of the corporate culture at Baptist Medical Center, because it is a very enabling corporate culture. And I wanted to do it, but I didn't have any track record. I had never worked in healthcare. I had all of that to learn, that huge body of knowledge that I had to begin to learn. And 2 months into my job, it changed. I was offered and asked to take over the administration of our capital campaign, which is really heavy-duty fundraising, and I had never done that as a professional, and I was scared to death. But I remember my mother always said, "Take tarts while tarts is passing," and I thought, I know I can do it, even though I can't prove it by my past record. I know that I can do this, so I just took a deep breath, and instead of running screaming into the night, took the job. So it was very risky, personally very risky for me to do.
Now, Virginia, I'm looking at you, and you just exude all of this confidence. You couldn't possibly ever be in a position where you were ever fearful.
I think the time that I was most frightened was when the grand jury investigated my agency.
Oh, okay. But you kept your cool.
Which happened a few years ago. And again, you know, you come out of these things much stronger. But that was an experience that was very frightening to me personally. I had never been in a position where people didn't believe, you know, what I was saying to them, and where I almost had to avoid my office because of hounding from the press and being terrified that when somebody interviewed you, you were going to say the wrong thing or it was going to be taken out of context. And I even had my husband answering the phone for me during that period of time, because I would get calls, you know, from reporters at night, that sort of thing. That was probably the scariest thing that ever happened during my career, but it was weathered, and part of the reason that it was weathered, I think, was my family. My husband has always been very, very supportive and very, very proud of what I've done. We've been married for 35 years. And so I had that protection at home. And during this period of time, we had some really strong staff and a very, very supportive board of directors of the agency who really got behind the staff and took care of us also. So I think, you know, it was frightening, but the support is there.
Support, that was going to be the next point, so that was a good transition to get to it. Our families do play a role in our professional lives, and I think both of you have been blessed with families that have been extremely supportive. Talk about how important that support has been, and we see that clearly it was really important for you at that time during that investigation, but perhaps some other times when the family support really played a role in your just being able to just make it through that door and feel secure enough that you could do your job, or to know that, just to put it in some perspective for you, because you had your family.
It's always important. I've tried to raise my sons to believe that whoever needs the support at the moment is the one who should get it. And it might be Graham because he's taking a final exam, or it might be Richard because he has a swim meet that is a state final or something, and that I will support them and they need to support me. I know when I'm going to be late. I only have one at home anymore. And we negotiate supper. I try when we go to the grocery store, when I go to the grocery store, because he only goes kicking and screaming, to sort of think about our meals, and I'll say, there are definitely two nights this week that I'm going to be late. It'll be your turn. You need to, whatever you fix, peanut butter and jelly is fine. Just have something when I get home. And I try to do the same for him when he has swim practice or whatever. That's a very minuscule point, but we do have to support each other.
It's a good point, too, and I think that it sort of shows us that a family is what your family is, and your family support, single parent, is going to, that family support means you're getting support from your children, and I'm sure you get support from your children as well, but as well as your husband. You know,
you probably give even more.
Well, I have two daughters and a son. They're all grown. They're 32, 30, and 27. My daughters, I think, are extremely proud of me, and it has made them feel very confident in going off and getting careers of their own. One of them's a television reporter, and the other is an advertising manager at Polygram Records. So both of them have done extremely well, and my son graduated from architecture school and is working with a design firm in New York City. Unfortunately, they've all moved away, and I missed that.
I'm sure.
So, but my husband has retired recently, and again, one of the really wonderful things that has happened as a result of that, although he has had some health problems, is that he takes care of things at home for me. I would come home and have this wonderful dinner waiting for me.
I'd like to have a wife.
Whereas I used to be the one who did that, you know, and would come home and say, oh my God, what am I going to have to eat tonight?
Whatever can your hand reaches for.
And he loves to cook, and he loves to prepare things so that they look attractive, you know, and I would come home late, and here would be this wonderful dinner, and it was just a delightful kind of thing to happen.
If it's there, you feel like you can handle things, you can work. So.
What about support from other people? Sometimes we lean on coworkers, and not only, you know, a lot of times we think that mentors for women should be women, but very often they're not. So who else has been supportive throughout your careers? And if you can, speak to some specific instances where it's really been helpful.
Carrying the family metaphor a little bit further, I like the fact that my staff and I at the foundation at Baptist have, you might say, a family atmosphere, because we take care of each other. We are cross-trained, and when someone is out, whether it be clerical staff or professional, we don't miss a beat. One of my professionals last year endured a rather lengthy illness which led to the death of her son, and we picked up the slack. I was so proud of us, because in the midst of the final throes of our capital campaign, we managed. And we did that because we have developed confidence in each other, and the feeling that we need to do that. We need to provide that kind of support. Okay. So we do that on on all levels in my office.
And Virginia?
In the health field, which I've been on the periphery of with the alcohol and drug rehabilitation, it seems that most agencies and most boards are headed by men. I very often find myself as the only woman in in a huge meeting. I'm sure that probably happens to you too. But one of the things that I have found is that along the way, a number of men have recognized my skills and abilities and have really become mentors for me and have gone to bat for me, have made sure in the incidents I gave in the last program that I wound up getting the job. When David Pingree was Secretary of HRS, he recognized what I had done with the Mental Health Board here, and when they were legislated out of existence, had me come to Tallahassee and work in one of the program offices. So there are people that were out there that gave me the opportunity to move ahead, and I think they were pretty much all men. I didn't really have any women mentors, and I think that's too bad, and I'm not sure why that happens, but I know one time a few years ago, a group of us were looking at this, and I think sometimes women become their own worst enemies.
I do too.
They don't really do the kinds of supportive things that they could do for other women, and they isolate themselves. And I've seen that occur in a lot of instances.
So how do you play the mentor role? Sounds like you think that's really important.
I try to do it with the women in my agency. I try to do it with my daughters, with my women friends. I try to make sure that people get the opportunity to move up if there's a position that becomes available. But again, going back to the education, I think a lot of women have not developed the educational track or the career track, and sometimes they really don't have the experience and skills to move into a management or an executive position, and so you still wind up with more men. We have a lot of work to do in that area.
So what work are you doing to try to bring more women into those positions?
I don't know how to answer that specifically. My whole staff is women, so I guess I foster them just as much as I can. And whenever I talk with anybody else from the medical center, we have a lot of women in management at the medical center. The chauvinism isn't rampant there, I don't think, like it is in many other places. And so I haven't felt held back by my gender. In fact, the person who hired me at Baptist to begin with was a woman, one of the executive vice presidents.
So do you ever have women coming to you, though, for help or guidance?
Sometimes for chats. And I have lots of women who come to me from elsewhere in the workforce and in the community, not so much inside as I do outside, coming for, I have a lot of that.
And what do you tell women who come to you?
What I've said today, keep on keeping on, educate yourselves, just like Virginia says, and explore every avenue, no matter how off the wall it might seem.
I think that people a lot of times burn bridges.
Don't ever do that.
Right. And they may, if someone says, will you serve on this committee, or...
If you can do it, you should do it.
Yeah. And I don't think that a lot of women understand that out of those come opportunities.
That's exactly where they come from.
Can you think of any times when you perhaps burned a bridge that you wish you wouldn't have burned and it came back to haunt you?
I don't know whether I have or not. I can't really think of any. I'm sure that I have somewhere.
I burned that memory too.
I probably have said no maybe when I shouldn't have said no, and who knows what it might have led to had I not said no. In the last several years, I've been so busy I have not been able to say yes as much as I used to.
Well, it's important to say no sometimes too, isn't it? Because I think that you have a tendency, if you're in a high-power position, to want to do everything, to want to give so much that you're just spreading yourself too thinly, and you're not effective.
I'm not searching as much as I used to for fulfillment. This career is very, very fulfilling to me. This job just, it answers so many needs and so many, the searching mode I was in, I don't feel like I'm in that anymore. I just feel so at home. I feel like I have found my niche.
Right.
This is what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I want to be at that very place. And I am not as hungry as I used to be, and therefore don't need to serve on committees and trying to find answers or make that magic connection.
Was there something?
I think one of the things that I try to do, because I am so busy with so many things, I've tried to get other people on my staff to participate in committees and
Yes.
community organizations and so on. I had people in my facilities at different parts join their local chamber, for instance, so that they would become involved in it, or my nursing staff go to, the AIDS Coalition
Right.
meetings and things of that sort, so that I don't have to be all things to all people.
But your organization can have a presence
The organization
there.
can have a presence, and also, as you were talking about,
Right.
people
That's
learn
right.
so much, make the contacts.
It helps them.
It helps them immensely. So another piece of being a female executive, or an executive period, is to delegate and to let go. And I think that's hard for women, because we kind of want to, take
Well, we're
care of
also used to doing
everything
it
and
all.
everybody, that it's hard to say, oh, you go there, I don't need to go. You feel like, well, maybe I should go too.
But by doing that, you are developing your people, really. You're developing your employees, your staff, and you're giving them some valuable opportunities. And they see that. They say, well, this person's empowering me. And I think that's a way that women, or again, as you said, all executives can really give back and help.
I see my staff flowering under that. When I let them take it, I say let them. When I encourage them to and give.
When you
give
let
them,
go.
Yes, they are delighted, and they do a good job. They're wonderful. I have a fantastic staff. I'm proud of them.
Right. It's interesting. We talk about mentors and being in a situation where there's a protege and a mentor. But I think that sometimes we can gain our inspiration, and I think especially women, that we're in a unique position to do this, to gain power from sometimes non-traditional means and people. The mother wit, if you will. Can you think of any women who have played a role in just inspiring you to be successful, who may not have been in a position of power, who may have been, a person who was even looking up to you?
I think when you are the most powerful, whether it be man or woman or whatever, but perhaps especially for women, you need to know exactly what you're talking about and be very sure of your facts and be very sure of your emotions and the part that emotions play in your argument or whatever it is you're espousing or whatever it is you are trying to do, because sometimes we get carried away with them. I'm a very emotional person. I always wear my heart on my sleeve.
You're kidding.
Yeah. I really am. You always know where I stand. And that can be a great detriment.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to play your cards a little closer to your vest, but still know what you're talking about and have your emotions in the proper place or channeled or whatever. And just don't back down if you can possibly help it. I think that's what gives you power.
Did you learn that from someone, or did you learn that through making
Through
mistakes?
great hardship and trial and error and failure. Yeah.
My mother used to say, you learn from your mistakes, but it sure would be better to learn from other people's mistakes so you don't have to
That's
make them
right.
all yourself.
That's right.
You'll be in bad shape if you have to make them all yourself. And that kind of gets back to the mother wit thing again. Was there anyone who perhaps played that role, or even your daughter sometimes, someone who has said something to you that has pretty much stuck in your mind and in some ways made all the difference?
I still have to go back to the point, I believe, that it was primarily men who made the difference in my progression and what I became. But again, when I started out in the workforce, we're talking 1960s.
Yeah.
We weren't
How many women were?
where we are today.
That's right. We certainly
weren't. I think it was a whole different thing,
Right.
As far as that's concerned. I do feel that I remember one time, and I think it was for FCCJ when I gave a talk, and this is years and years ago, about women. I looked at my grandmother and my mother and myself, and then my daughters coming along, and the 4 generations and the differences in where they were with how they perceived themselves. My grandmother, even though she never worked, was a working woman, because first there was a farm and then there was a neighborhood grocery store, and she was very involved in it. I mean, my grandfather was in charge, but she was right next to him. My mother did the traditional secretary, support staff, office manager kinds of things. And then I came along and moved kind of a notch above that. And my daughters have started out being managers. They didn't go through all of the throes of the volunteerism.
And your son will probably marry a manager.
Probably, yeah.
I think mine will. I'm glad they see a professional woman.
So there's been it's interesting to me to see the progression in the generations and the differences in the way that you come through this and to this.
You always had a model, it sounds like, of a working woman, though. That's good. I want to get back to a point that you brought up a little earlier, Julie, the thing of emotions and what role that plays and how you, not that all women are emotional. A lot of people would like to think that.
Humans are.
But how do you channel that energy?
Well, it's a blessing most of the time, but it can be a curse. I remember taking a management seminar years and years ago, like 15 years ago, a long time ago, and I don't remember anything from this seminar except one thing, and the teacher said that before every meeting, big, little, children, home, office, church, whatever, he wrote himself a memo, and it's entitled, What I Want to Happen, and he writes himself a What I Want to Happen memo. And to tell you the truth, I do that before every meeting I go into or anything I do. I take the time to figure out what I want to come out of that and how best I can make it happen. And usually you don't make it happen by being emotional and pounding the table. You usually have to be pretty rational and have your arguments marshaled. So especially for real important things, it's just like chairing a meeting. You would never go into a meeting without an agenda. And you would never, if you're running the meeting, you would never throw something out for votes unless you'd lined up the votes in advance, or you had done your homework and you knew pretty much how things were going out, or that you were willing to live with whatever the answer might be. So I think that's the way we do it. You don't just go blindly into anything and start kicking and screaming or shouting or even dominating the conversation.
Okay. Seems like you learned that probably through some trial and error.
And finding out that you're not effective.
Yeah.
That's the strongest lesson of all, to find out you don't win if you do that.
So, Virginia, how have you learned to be effective as a manager?
Well, I get very angry sometimes, and I do, yell and scream.
You do? You seem so calm and cool.
There's a man who works for me who's a gentleman close to my age that had retired and moved down here, and he's our operations director. And he always tells the story of when I threw the telephone at him in the office one day.
So you do get emotional.
I do lose my cool every so often.
Well, maybe if you do it judiciously.
But it's always nice to have somebody that you can sound off on, and they're going to love you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. You do need to have that.
It's nice to have somebody that you can to do that to, and they understand you. I had a hard time in earlier years. I do much better now at controlling my emotions than I used to.
Me too.
I was, sometimes if I was in a difficult situation, I could get very weepy about it and really be so emotional that I couldn't deal with it. And I've always had kind of a tendency to be weepy if something hits me emotionally, or, I see something and it really strikes me. I can, spring tears at a drop of the hat. So that's something that I've had trouble trying to control. And it may be one of the reasons that I try to do this outward calm control kind of thing so that that doesn't come through too much.
So is it just experience?
I think it has a lot to do with experience.
Yeah. None of this occurred when we were 20 years old or even 30 years old. So,
you spoke earlier about paying dues and about how sometimes I think the eagerness gets the best of us. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you first entered into the profession that you're in now?
I wish I had understood that everything that happens to you contributes to what you are, and it's part of the thread that weaves the fabric that you are, to use a metaphor. And that it's all okay. Even the negative things, my goodness, the negative things sometimes teach you the strongest lessons of all. And when you were asking a little while ago a question about who influenced you the most, sometimes some of those influences were negatives, and you said, I will never be like that, or I don't, you know what you don't want to do, which can be just as valuable as knowing what you do want to do.
Okay. And Virginia, we have a few more seconds if you can talk about what you wish you had known when you first got into the field.
Well, I think probably the thing that I wish that I had known was that I could do it.
Yes.
I didn't have a lot of confidence when I was a young woman.
Okay.
I would like to have had more confidence in myself.
You certainly have it now. And thank you very much, both of you, for sharing your experiences, personal experiences with us. I think that's going to be very helpful for women who are trying to get to that position where you are. So again, thank you very much, Julie Woodruff, and thank you, Virginia Borrock. And I'm Kelly Williams. I've been your host for today, and thank you for joining us.